Yes, Aviral, we are live on YouTube, so all good to go.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aviral. I'm from Praja Foundation. I welcome you all on behalf of Praja Foundation, National Institute of Urban Affairs, and UN Habitat in this Prajatantra Knowledge Session, this year Prajatantra Knowledge Session. Just to start with, I just request everyone to be on mute and also raise questions in the chat box. As you know, we all are waiting eagerly to for the big day. That is, the Chandrayaan-3 will land approx the same time that we'll supposed to close our knowledge session. So we'll try to wrap up this session as soon as possible, but tentatively by 5:50. With that, I'll just start with the session. So as you know, we have participants for this Prajatantra 2023, the National Youth Festival. And today we are gathered to host our two speakers to talk about on city governance, the legal and institutional frameworks. Moving forward, I know Prajatantra has been a journey over the last 5 years. Last year, we kept in a National Youth Festival, which was organized by the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which was under the G20, Y20, and the Urban 20 platforms, where we have received more than 217 participating colleges, more than 1,000 participants participated last year. Taking this journey forward, this year, we have received registration for 343 teams, more than 1,800 participants from 26 states, 6 union territories, and 100+ cities. I'm happy to share this map will give you an idea about the participant that we have in our Zoom meeting right now. We have representation from Jammu and Kashmir, from Kerala, from Gujarat, and right from Arunachal and the Northeast states as well. So this Prajatantra Festival, the National Youth Festival, is a culmination of young minds who talk about their city, learn about their city, and also be a futuristic torchbearer for change in their respective cities. With that, I want to welcome today's guest or speakers, Mr. Lavlesh Sharma. Welcome, Lavlesh. Lavlesh, who's 11+ years of experience as a development expert and urban infrastructure planner, architect, and academician in India as well as in UAE. Lavlesh is currently head of the Urban Youth Unit at National Institute of Urban Affairs. We welcome you, Lavlesh.
Thank you.
Our speaker for today is Professor Tushar Bose. Professor Tushar Bose is an associate professor at the Faculty of Technology, CEPT University, Ahmedabad. He has over 12 years of experience in teaching, research, and consultancy. Over the year, he has been associated with many national and international development agencies and worked on many development projects in India. We welcome you, sir, for today's knowledge session. As you know, we are here to discuss about the role of youth to ensure the water secure and urban ecosystem. I just wanted to share that this Prajatantra knowledge session aims to give understanding to our participants, those who joined from across India, and will form their strategies, the policies for their respective cities in this competition, being a mayor of their respective cities, the chairperson of the committees, as well as the competition like debate competition, the quiz competition, and op-ed writing. So I hope this knowledge session will help all our participants to learn more about their cities and give a new perspective from our speakers. With that, I'll hand over to the floor to Lavlesh to start this knowledge session and also set the context. Thank you, Lavlesh.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aviral, and thank you once again on behalf of National Institute of Urban Affairs. I welcome all of you to this knowledge session, and special thanks to Prajatantra to leading it from front, like leading it from front in terms of the youth's energy and the kind of spark we always happen to see, and you are taking it season by season every year. This charismatic energy has been utilized and taken care of very, very properly by Prajatantra. Congratulations once again on that. Thank you, Professor Tushar. He comes from SEPT, as Aviral already mentioned. An engineer, environmental enthusiast by his education, but a lot of work related to water he is into. Yes, a very energetic, a very young, very close friend to me too, accepting the invitation to share his viewpoints here at this platform. As we know, this National Youth Festival is going through various stages, and where we are trying to fetch the knowledge from the champions for the youth and vice versa. In this particular topic today, the role of youth in water security. When we were thinking to decide a particular topic for this discussion, the whole idea revolved around PM's message and a call for the country that by 2047, how youth can contribute to make India a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And this we mention every time. Under that overarching umbrella also, the Urban Youth Unit recently established UYU at NIUA, also taking this message forward. And for SDG 6, how we can contribute for the security of water for the cities. It's a high time when, apart from other logistic support, youth should come forward, put their foot forward, and how it can be utilized. So with this overarching idea, we will go to Professor Tushar. Professor Tushar, the floor is yours. We will hear from you, and then we'll take Aviral questions from the participants because of the time constraint, and this way we'll go ahead further. So thank you so much. Over to you, Professor Tushar.
Thank you, Lavlesh. Thank you for calling me. It's always a pleasure to discuss your ideas with young minds. My focus today would be on the problem why we want to talk about water, especially in our cities. And somebody has already posted a question on the rural-urban divide in terms of the water consumption. And I'll try to answer that, what cities can contribute and how we can reduce the impacts of climate change. So that will be the first part of my presentation. And finally, I'll talk about how directly youth can contribute. So let's begin. One of the problems which we as a country or as a world are facing is climate change. All of us are aware of it. However, one of the fundamental changes what climate change is doing is changing the patterns of extremes in the country. One of the biggest outcomes of climate change we see in our country is the increase in the frequency of flooding. And one of the paper estimates that from 1950 to 2015, incidences of extreme flood rainfall events have almost tripled. So they're threefold. Also, as a country, in the last 6 decades, the overall cost of flooding has been 4.6 lakh crores. So at one point, we are already facing the impacts of climate change. And the issue is in future also, the IPCC report, the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report, the 6th assessment report, tells you that, with a high confidence interval, that such incidences of rainfall, both in terms of their frequency and intensity, are going to change. The graph below which you see is how the floods event in the countries are increasing decadally from 1900 to recently. So from just the historical data, you understand that the events of floods have been changing. And like I said, IPCC is also suggesting there will be an increase in such events. Now, cities become very interesting and are at a very interesting crossroad because, as a country, like Lavlesh was also mentioning, that we want to become developed. And development brings with it the pressure of urbanization. So we see as development happens, as cities expand. And with that expansion, what is happening in our cities is especially the conversion of pervious surfaces to impervious surfaces. So in the last 20 years, 30 years, from 1991 to 2017, just give me a second. Sorry. So in the last couple of decades, the built-up area in cities has almost doubled. And this built-up area change comes at a cost of urban greens and open spaces. So overall, the surfaces of the cities are becoming more impervious. And when cities surfaces become impervious, there's more runoff which the cities have to handle. So what this does, when I said the runoff, more the cities have to handle more runoff. So what is happening is, because of your surfaces becoming impervious, there is less infiltration into the ground. At the same time, there is less evapotranspiration which is happening. So, overall, the water which should have been absorbed and should have become your groundwater is flooding your city. So uh, on one hand, you're reducing the groundwater, overall groundwater storage in the city. At the same time, you are flooding the cities with excess stormwater. This is just the basics of how things change when surface of cities become more impervious. So what happens is, in the pre-development stage, the water which flows in a city develops like this. So over time, this is the maximum discharge which a city receives. So this is the stormwater which we need to handle in a city when it is in a pre-development stage. When the surfaces become more impervious, this peak becomes almost double or triple, and you end up handling this much overall discharge for your stormwater. So while you design your stormwater for a certain capacity, as you develop, the overall volume of stormwater that needs to be handled in the city increases, and therefore which leads to more flooding. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that is not the only issue with water. What is happening in India, especially, we see a very unique pattern that at one point during certain times in the overall year, this thing during certain times of the year there is flooding. At the same time, during certain months we see that there's lack of water. So in fact, flash droughts are also increasing and have increased by sevenfold from 1979 and till the 21st century. In fact, some of you might remember that when COVID was setting up in 2019, there was a talk of Chennai reaching day zero, that the city will not have any water on that day. India also is the largest consumer of groundwater, and in the next 20 years, about 60% of Indian aquifers will be critical. So what we are seeing at one point is there is excess stormwater which is flooding our cities. At the same time, we are extracting a lot of groundwater. The water is not percolating, and therefore which will lead to depletion of our groundwater resources. So basically, it becomes a two-pronged problem. So now, how do we deal with it? So one of the things the IPCC is suggesting as one of a possible solutions to the issue is something called a climate resilient development. The climate resilient development, just one second, So the climate resilient development is nothing but development which looks at mitigation and adaptation measures to support sustainable development goals. So what the IPCC is suggesting is that there are certain solutions which exist. So there are certain solutions which exist, but which need societal transformation for these changes to happen. And therefore, any development would require some kind of societal transformation in areas like energy, land, oceans, and ecosystem, urban infrastructure, industries, and societies. So that is what the IPCC sixth assessment report is suggesting. However, one of the issues with this is we have a really narrowing window. So the onus is on the young generation, all of you, on how do we change the business as usual scenario to a more sustainable climate resilient scenario. So this again is from IPCC, and what it suggests is what will be our development pathways depending on the choice we make. So whether we want to become more resilient and how do we become more resilient? Because what happened after especially COVID is we saw certain shocks can in fact change your development pathway. What IPCC is suggesting is 5 points, 5 dimensions of this development, which will depend on people and will lead to prosperity through partnership, peace, and overall planetary health. I'll just quickly talk about these definitions because they are important as we move forward. So adaptation is basically is our capacity to bear any of the changes in the climate because of climate change. So that is our ability to adjust. Mitigation is how do human interventions reduce some of these greenhouse gases, and vulnerability is again the capacity of a city or a population to be adversely affected because of climate change. So these are three key definitions. I think while moving forward, you will be required to know. Now, in the definition itself of climate resilient development, there is a talk of meeting sustainable development goals. So I am sure these goals you would be aware of. For cities, we are especially looking at the goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. So any city would want to develop sustainability. It has to reduce shocks because of climate change. At the same time, it has to be more sustainable. So what and how can we become water secure? One of the solutions which is now gaining popularity, in fact, which IPCC is also suggesting, the United Nations are also suggesting, is something called a nature-based solution. So how can we use nature to both address the population of droughts, which I talked about, and excess stormwater in the cities which we are seeing? There are multiple definitions which are being used in and which are very popular, from ecological based adaptation to green infrastructure to blue infrastructure, green blue infrastructure, sustainable urban drainage system. So these form basically a gambit of strategies which basically form nature based solutions. I'll talk briefly about how do we define some of these definitions. So there's a very good paper which is referred here by Malster et al., which has termed these different definitions as the green chameleon. So there's first is the best management practices. The term started with prevention of pollution. So it was nothing but how do you prevent pollution entering the water system. So because USA has something called a combined network which carries sewer and stormwater together, the idea was how do you reduce pollution in the stormwater. The next is low impact development. The idea of these strategies is how do you gain how do you adapt, how do you basically achieve the natural topography, natural hydrology of an area through some small scale measures. SUDS is again similar to LID, but it was more, the definition is more adopted in UK. Then we had something called a water sensitive urban design, which is Australian or definition, but it looks like a much larger area, and also looks at urban planning measures. Then we had something called integrated water management, which is nothing but also looking at institutional structures of water management along with the physical measures. Nowadays, the two most popular terms are green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So these are broader definitions and do not only talk about stormwater, but larger strategies like food security, adaptation, and stuff like that, even energy in some cases. Now I'll talk about the Indian context. How do NBS and how NBS have flared in the Indian context? There are four major strategies of adopting NBS in the cities. One is vegetation and landscaping. The other is impervious area management. The third is time of concentration modification. And fourth is stormwater collection. So for vegetation and landscaping, we have three strategies: urban forestry, something called a vegetative strips, and rain gardens. I have kept some of these references as at the bottom of the slide. So you can, when you go back, you can look at them. I'll be explaining them in brief. However, But it is always good to go back and refer to some of the materials online or in books or in some of the papers, as the case here is. The second strategy is impervious area management, and we have two strategies here. Something called a pervious pavement and roof gardens, so that impervious areas in cities are reduced. The third strategy is reducing time of concentration through something called a vegetative swale or bioswale. The idea is, how do you reduce that peak which I showed you in the first or second slide for a city, and how do you again achieve the natural topography, natural hydrology of a city through these measures. The fourth is stormwater collection. So how can we use probably something called a rainwater barrel, retention and detention pond, infiltration wells or infiltration trenches for storing the stormwater. Again, these strategies can be at building scale, it can be at neighborhood scale, it can be at urban catchment area. These are some of the examples from India which I see. So this is bioswale, which is there in Gift City, Ahmedabad. The idea is they are using it as a swale, but this is also the land for them in future when they develop the space as stormwater more with higher capacity. Same, this is so I come from Ahmedabad, so most of my examples are in and around Ahmedabad. There's a convention center in Gandhinagar called Mahatma Mandir. This is the Google image of that convention center, and there's a large green roof on that convention center. Then there is something called a constructed wetlands. I'll come to our case here. So again, Gift City has 2 ponds for retention of stormwater. The idea is whatever the stormwater is collected will be again reused for gardening. So that is the idea of the city. There's a small difference between a detention pond and retention pond. The detention ponds will go dry between 2 rainfall periods, while the retention ponds will hold water throughout. We also saw some examples of something called a Miyawaki forest in Ahmedabad. This is a microforest in South Bhopal, wherein Miyawaki as a system was adopted to have rapid plantation in a small area. So we see now in Ahmedabad something called a microforest coming up. There are 2 more strategies which worldwide which are now very popular. One is the sponge city. So there's a small movie, but in this thing of time, in the interest of time, I'll share the presentation with you and the links, and I'll request you guys to look at it. But sponge city is nothing but, when you combine the initiatives I had talked about, so from rain gardens to rooftop gardens to bioswales, if you combine them and reduce the overall stormwater in the city, that is the idea. So what it does is you create a sponge in the city which stores rainwater. It helps in infiltration. At the same time, it reduces the overall runoff in the city. I will talk about the Indian case study in detail. Therefore, I am not spending time here. The other example is Room for Rivers, which is in Netherlands. I'll just quickly talk about this project. In this project also, what has been done is along the rivers, they have created more space for rivers to flood during heavy showers or heavy flooding, this thing. Again, I'll share my presentation with you so that this can be, you guys can look at this, or if there is time at the end of the presentation, I'll come back to this slide and show you. Because I wanted to talk about more of my city and one of the projects in Ahmedabad, therefore I did not spend time on those 2 slides. So I want to talk about one of the projects which used the nature or the lakes in that context and reduced the overall flooding in the city. So it is basically an interlinking of lakes project in Ahmedabad. So last year we received some funding and we could look at the project which was executed in 2005. And we wanted to look at what happens when such a project is taken up, whether it is actually successful, not successful after 15 years. So the interlinking of what triggered this. So interlinking of lake project is basically you interlink some of these lakes to reduce the overall flooding in the city. Now, it's a very novel idea. Usually in cities, what you do is if there's flooding, you have more stormwater network. So What was done, however, is a novel approach of interlinking of lakes. And what triggered is an extreme flooding situation which happened on 14th of July 2000. So almost 325 mm of rainfall was received in a single day. Ahmedabad's average is around 800 mm. So you can imagine that it's more than 25% of the rainfall received, almost 35% of the rainfall of the entire annual rainfall received in a single day. 5,000, there was lot of property losses, and it was found out that most of the buildings were flouting building laws. The other trigger was, Ahmedabad was consistently losing lakes. So Ahmedabad, if you look at the city, like most of the city, it is basically over time, it is amalgamation of some of these village gamtals, village hamlets, and every village, if you have been to India, has some of these ponds. Over time, what was happening is because of real estate pressure, these were becoming these were getting lost. So these are some of the examples of the lakes being lost. So somewhere it is becoming a neighborhood center, somewhere it is becoming again neighborhood center, somewhere it is becoming a garden, somewhere it is just encroached by real estate or slum development. The other trigger was groundwater was also depleting, and the fourth trigger was the judicial intervention. The courts also decided enough of this. We have to protect our lakes, and therefore this project was taken up. So, what is this project? Is the project was done in two phases, and if you see, this is the map of Ahmedabad. If I can show you, so just give me a second. So, this is Ahmedabad's boundary, and there are two stages of these projects. So this is stage two. The blue one is the stage one. So blue one is the stage one. The green is the stage two. So in the stage one, what happened is the lakes of Sola, Memnagar, Thaltej, Vastrapur, Bodakdev were interconnected. The idea was they will be connected to the local catchment. So water, anything falling here will go to this lake. And because the topography of the city is from north to south, and if you can see the river, it is also flows from north to south. Whatever water overflows from this lake after its capacity will flow to the Thaltej. Similarly, water from Memnagar, excess water, first will be collected in the lake, and excess water will flow to other lakes. And finally, it will end up in the Sabarmati river. Similarly, phase two is also interconnection, but instead of going to the Sabarmati river, it goes to an area called Gota Godavi Canal. So this is the Gota Godavi Canal where it goes to. Okay. Oops, sorry. I will have to get rid of annotation. Okay. So what were the components of the project? So there were two major components: what is happening outside the lake area and what is happening inside. So inside the lake area, of course, there was increase in the capacity of the lake because of years of silt deposition. The capacity of the lakes were required to increase. And one of the major things Ahmedabad did was demarcating these lakes through road. Encroachments were removed and percolation wells were added. And some of these percolation wells again to facilitate more groundwater and this is what happened on the outside. So there were gates which were connecting water from different sides, and outlet to the other recreational spaces were created for people. So this is the overall timeline of the project. So it started in 2002, and it is still a continuing project. So, more lakes are being interconnected both on the east and western side of the city. This is one of the basically outcomes of the lake interlinking. That what is happening is, along with the lake area, more area is added to the lake. So you can see the lake area here, and so over time, more area is added in the planning process, and overall you add green spaces to the lake. So it is basically also providing green spaces to the city. These are some of the impacts of the project. So this is first is flood resilience. So like I said, when we studied this project, these are some of the points which are flooded. And if you look at the green lines, which are of the interlinking of lakes, you don't see any flood points in the city. This is because majorly these interconnected lakes have provided 3 million cubic meter of storage space for the city through interconnecting 13 lakes. Again, groundwater situation, we looked at some cases where interlinking has happened and whether groundwater situation has improved. So this is the Vastrapur Lake, which was the first pilot project. If you see, the groundwater has come up from 105 to now it is only at the depth of 95 meter. While for the lakes which are not interconnected, the groundwater is still depleting, or is it either constant or it's still depleting. So this is one of the benefits, that groundwater levels are also improving. The third impact we looked at was how is the interlinking helping the overall green spaces in the city. This is an analysis called NDVI, Net Density Vegetation Index, and you see some of the red spots now converting to yellow or greenish, which indicates more green spaces being created by the interlinking of lake. In fact, 10% of the Ahmedabad lake right now are because of these interlinking of lakes. One of the other socio-economic benefit was increase in land values. Of course, if there's a good lake around, the land values will improve. So this is one of the, and one of the interesting things you see happening is now the real estate market also starts taking benefit of such schemes. And you see some of the schemes being renamed like Shaligram Lakeview or something. So now real estate also is starting to understand the value of these projects. One of the other social impacts was, people living in slum quarters were also given housing at this thing. So it's basically the scheme helped not only creating green spaces or flood resilience, but like I said, any climate resilient development has to look at the different aspects of the sustainable development goals. That is what the project also tried looking at. Now I'll talk about the role of youth very briefly. One of the fundamental things which the youth has to do is build up their knowledge, how climate is changing, what are the different impacts of climate change, whom is it affecting. Look at what are the recommendation of probably the AR6 report, the assessment report 6 of the IPCC. How is this particular problem more important for India? Which are our vulnerable areas for India? Where should we be working on? Secondly, what are the suggestions for Indian cities? What are they talking about? Are they giving us some measures and because see, the assessment reports are just synthesis of basically research studies over 5-6 years. So they don't do anything, but they synthesize the research findings from different authors throughout the world. So what benefits you is you try to, when you read such reports, it basically increases your overall understanding. Also, it gives you access to a lot of research material. So it basically keep your eyes open to impacts of climate change. That would be my first this thing. The other thing is what our prime minister is also encouraging, which is lifestyle for environment. If you have heard his recent speeches, he talks about how we can reduce our overall footprints and consumption. So this is a map from Worldview. It talks about how much area each country takes amongst each person takes from different countries as the land area from the earth. So you see India's contribution to be lesser in per capita terms, but our contribution from, if you multiply it with population, is large. How can we reduce this on an individual level? How can we reduce this? The same goes with low carbon lifestyle. How can we reduce our own footprints? The third area is energy. How can we reduce energy consumption? So can we do something to reduce energy consumption in cities? How can we encourage public transportation, bikes or bike sharing, this thing? Can youth take this forward? Because, if youth start using what I really like is some of the campuses, in fact, CEPT has a bicycles and IITs have these bicycles. So I see some of the youth already doing it, but this thing is for shorter trips. Of course, reduce your energy consumption and try using sustainable transport. The most important thing is connecting with others. So it's very good we have been connected here on a digital platform. Try listening to people, try connecting with people, try to understand their contribution and their ideas on reducing the overall impacts of climate change or any other challenge, water, for example, which we are dealing with today. and finally taking action. So taking action is, of course, Prajatantra is one of the best forums of taking action, or at least communicating your ideas. Taking action is as important as any of these. So as a community, how do you take action is very, very important, because like I showed you in one of the slides earlier, that our window is narrowing. If we don't do anything right now, we would have lost chance to adapt to, we would have lost our adaptation capacity at the end. So with that, I will, I'll stop my screen sharing and I'll invite some comments by Lavlesh, and then I'll take up questions. So yeah, and I can show you that movie if our time permits at the end, because let me just stop sharing. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tushar. It was really a good, quick deep dive into the issues related to water, climate, and with the lens of going ahead with the role of youth. And very well mentioned, because it's a need of the as an individual. We also need to check the carbon footprint we are generating and how we can utilize the resources as less as possible. And this would be the contribution individually from each of us as youth and as a informed citizen. So I think this covers major ideas, areas which we were seeking you to address primarily. Then I will request Aviral to take up some question. I see many questions out there
Yes.
for our guest professor. Yeah.
Sure. To add on, thank you, Tushar, for the detailed discussion on the understanding of the importance of water management specifically. And आपने जो example share किए हैं, Ahmedabad specific and बाकी, इससे हमारे participant जो अलग-अलग cities से हैं, अलग-अलग states से हैं, they are representing their respective cities as well. तो ये रिलेट कर पा रहे होंगे कि उनके पास भी जो उनके नेबरहुड में जो प्रॉब्लम्स हो रहे हैं उसके प्रोबेबल सॉल्यूशंस क्या हो सकते हैं. सो थैंक यू फॉर दैट. आई कैन सी बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस तो चैट बॉक्स में. सो द जनरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग अबाउट वाटर मैनेजमेंट, तो एक हम उससे स्टार्ट करते हैं कि अगर एक सिटी में बिकॉज दीज पार्टिसिपेंट विल अल्टीमेटली वर्क और सपोर्ट देयर म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशंस. सो पहला क्वेश्चन आ जाता है कि जब आपने ये प्रोजेक्ट शुरू किया था अहमदाबाद के लिए, जब हमने तो कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग ऑफ अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज, क्या हमारे पास आपको कितना चैलेंज दिखा वहां से, और यूथ कैसे उसको काउंटरएक्ट कर सकता है? फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर आप देखेंगे कॉर्पोरेशंस को या जो पैरास्टेटल्स हैं उनके साथ में आइडेंटिफाई करना और उसके लिए चैलेंज, तो आपका एक्सपीरियंस कैसा रहा ऐसे, और आप क्या सजेस्ट करेंगे पार्टिसिपेंट्स को व्हेन दे take these projects for their respective cities or propose, उनको क्या ध्यान में रखना चाहिए? So with that, this is my first thing, and then we'll take move forward.
Okay, very good question. In fact, यार मैं हिंदी में बात करूंगा क्योंकि बहुत लोगों ने लिख रखा है, मैंने देखा नहीं था. मतलब आई एम रियली सॉरी, मतलब क्योंकि चैट प्रॉम्प्ट होता नहीं है व्हेन यू टॉक ऑन यूट्यूब के दिस मीडियम. देखिए, पहली बात तो ये है कि आपका सिटी से ना एक कनेक्शन होना चाहिए. मतलब आप कॉर्पोरेशन में काम करते हैं, किसी पैरास्टेटल में काम करते हैं, एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग सिटी का चाहिए, और आप किस तरीके से लोगों से जुड़ते हैं वो काफी इंपॉर्टेंट होता है. इनफैक्ट जिस प्रोजेक्ट्स की मैंने बात की वो मुझे बहुत यूनिक लगता है. ये इंटरलिंकिंग ऑफ लेक मुझे काफी इसने प्रभावित किया है, मेजरली क्योंकि इसके जो सजेशंस थे वो आए थे म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन से, मतलब जो कि अर्बन डेवलपमेंट अथॉरिटी से. तो ये इसीलिए इम्पोर्टेंट है क्योंकि जो मेन इनके ये हिमांशु ठक्कर जी थे जो कि इंजीनियर थे, उसमें उनका ये आइडिया था. और उनको भी आइडिया किसने दिया? उनके एक जो ओडा के चीफ थे सुरेंद्र पटेल, और सुरेंद्र पटेल जी थे किसान. अब उनको ये समझ में आता था कि पानी बहता है और अहमदाबाद में पानी एक शीट फ्लो में बहता है, जो कि हमने डेवलपमेंट से रोक दिया है. और उन्होंने काफी अपना ग्राउंड नॉलेज यूज किया इन टेकिंग दिस अप. सो देखिए, क्लाइमेट चेंज का पूरा जो अभी का आप ये नया रिपोर्ट देखेंगे वो बात करता है लोकल नॉलेज की. तो मैं इनफैक्ट सबसे ये रिकमेंड करूंगा कि हाउ हम लोग किस तरीके से हमारे जो सीनियर्स हैं, थोड़े एल्डरली हैं, उनसे कैसे सीखे कि वो लोग अपने जमाने में ये प्रॉब्लम्स कैसे सॉल्व किया करते थे, उनके जमाने में ये प्रॉब्लम्स कैसे डील होती थी। क्योंकि आजकल ये एक बीच में ये दौर आया था कि हम लोग हर एक जो फंडामेंटल या हर एक स्ट्रैटेजी जो यूएस, यूरोप और एनी अदर डेवलपमेंट कंट्री में यूज करते थे, वो हम लोग डायरेक्ट ही सोचते थे ये इंडिया में फिट हो जाएगा। आजकल बहुत बड़ा फोकस है कि आप कैसे इन सॉल्यूशंस को लोकलाइज कर सकते हैं और अपने हिसाब से बना सकते हैं। तो मेरा सजेशन रहेगा, सबसे बात करिए लोगों से जो सिटी को डेवलप होते हुए देख रहे हैं उनको, क्योंकि इनको पता रहता है कौन सा नाला है ना इन्होंने भर दिया है, मतलब ओवर डेवलपमेंट से कौन सा एक मेजर ड्रेनेज चैनल भर गया, जो शायद आपको पता भी ना हो, आप पैदा भी ना हुए हो जब वो चैनल भर दिया था। So that is important to connect to the city.
या थैंक यू तुषार, आपके रिस्पॉन्स से आई गेस इसके आपके एग्जांपल से दे विल आल्सो फाइंड देयर टॉर्च बेयरर्स और उनसे अंडरस्टैंड करेंगे कि उनके सिटी में रिस्पेक्टिव सिटीज में क्या क्या चैलेंजेस हैं और उसके प्रोबेबल सॉल्यूशन के लिए। लवलेश, एनीथिंग टू ऐड फ्रॉम योर एंड, बिकॉज आल्सो एनआईयू आल्सो सपोर्ट द कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग फ्रंट एज वेल एज विद रिसर्च एंड आल्सो उनको यूथ को भी बिल्ड करता है ताकि वो अपने लोकल एक्शंस के लिए प्रमोट कर सकें। एनीथिंग टू ऐड लवलेश?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, एक छोटा सा पॉइंट ऐड करना चाहूंगा, जैसा अभी तुषार बता रहे थे। एज अ नागरिक हमको अपने शहर से कनेक्ट होना पड़ेगा। शहर का कोई भी भाग हो सकता है, चाहे वो रिवर हो, वाटर बॉडी की बात की, और शहर के जो ऑपरेशंस हैं उसमें भी एज अ यूथ हमें सपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि हमारी एक लिमिटेड कैपेसिटी, हम किसी प्रोग्राम में या किसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ रहे होते हैं, एक लिमिटेड कैपेसिटी में हम सिटी के साथ जुड़ सकते हैं। एनआईयू ने एक प्रयास किया है, एक ब्रिज का रोल अदा करने का प्रयास किया है कि हम विभिन्न प्रोग्राम्स के अलग अलग प्रोग्राम्स के स्टूडेंट्स को अलग अलग शहरों से कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं कई अलग अलग माध्यम से। एक स्टूडेंट थीसिस कंपटीशन में हम स्टूडेंट के रिसर्च वर्क को एक पर्टिकुलर रिवराइन सिटी से कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं, एंड नाउ वंस यू आर डन विद द कंपटीशन यू आर कनेक्टेड टू द सिटी कमिश्नर उस शहर की नदी के पर्पस से। स्मार्ट सिटी के अंदर फेलोशिप्स हमने शुरू की हैं, जहां पर आप जिस स्मार्ट सिटी में कनेक्ट करते हैं उस शहर के और भी आर पाइपलाइन जाके सिटी के साथ डायरेक्ट हाथ से हाथ मिलाकर उनके कार्य में साझा कर सकते हैं। तो आई थिंक इट्स अ हाई टाइम, और इससे अच्छा और क्या मौका होगा कि आप अपने शहरों को डायरेक्टली उनके प्रबंधन में इतने नजदीकी से देख पा रहे हैं। सो दिस इज फ्रॉम एनआईयू's एफर्ट्स टू।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल अवलेश, थैंक यू। आई होप प्रजातंत्र एक प्लेटफॉर्म भी बनेगा जिससे सारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स हमारे अपने अपने सिटीज में जो आज की लर्निंग है उसको लेते हुए अपने प्लेटफॉर्म्स के लिए हम यूज कर सकते हैं। जस्ट कपल ऑफ क्विक क्वेश्चंस तुषार एंड लवलेश। जस्ट मैं क्लब कर रहा हूँ 2-3 क्वेश्चंस को, तो पार्टिसिपेंट्स पूछ रहे हैं कि हमारे सिटीज में, इंडियन सिटीज में वाटर क्राइसिस कैसे इंपैक्ट करता है वर्नेबल को। सो वो एक बहुत एग्जांपल है, क्योंकि फर्स्ट दे हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड कि ये इम्पैक्ट किस पे करता है। क्या ये अपार्टमेंट्स में रहने वालों का इम्पैक्ट करता है या स्लम्स में रहने वालों का इम्पैक्ट करता है या ये इम्पैक्ट करता है। सो फर्स्ट इज दिस, इफ यू कैन गिव सर्टेन एग्जांपल्स किसी का बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस। आपने अहमदाबाद का एग्जांपल दिया, क्या ऐसा कोई सिटी है जिसने वाटर क्राइसिस को मैनेज किया हो थ्रू दी प्रैक्टिसेस? अगर आप वो ऐड कर सकते हैं। और अगर आप रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग एंड अदर प्रैक्टिसेस जो अराउंड होती हैं अदर देन दिस प्रैक्टिसेस, तो आप वो ऐड ऑन करना चाहेंगे। तुषार एंड देन लवलीश प्लीज।
ओके, रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग तो देखिए मुख्यतः अपना मॉडल बिल्डिंग बायलॉज भी बात करता है रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग को कंपलसरी बनाने के लिए। हम लोग अभी भी कोशिश सी होता क्या है, मतलब अहमदाबाद को तो हमने अच्छी बात की अहमदाबाद की, बट एक सिटी में एज अ सिटीजन हम लोग जब रहते हैं हम लोग कई प्रैक्टिसेस देखते हैं। तो अभी जो रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग का स्टेटस है ये काफी खाना पूर्ति के लिए बस बना दें, परमिशन मिल जाएगा और हो जाएगा। इसका मेरा पर्सनल मानना है ये इसीलिए भी है क्योंकि हमारे जो बायलॉज है काफी कुछ हद तक काफी स्ट्रिंजेंट है, एंड दे रिक्वायर, मतलब जैसे मैं एक चेन्नई की बात करूं तो चेन्नई में हर एक बिल्डिंग के लिए रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग कंपलसरी है। ऐसा नहीं है कि वो फिजिबल है या नहीं फिजिबल है, बट वो मैंडेटरी है। तो जब आप थोड़े से कंस्ट्रक्ट, मतलब बिल्कुल सॉल्व ये रिस्ट्रिक्टिव एनवायरनमेंट क्रिएट कर देते हैं, तब थोड़ी सी स्ट्रैटेजीज काम नहीं करती। और दूसरा होता है पब्लिक का ओवरऑल अवेयरनेस कि हम लोग कितना कंट्रीब्यूट करना चाहते हैं टुवर्ड्स एनवायरनमेंट, बिकॉज this will depend on डेफिनेटली ऑन यूथ कि आप लोग अपने सोसाइटीज में अपने मोहल्ले में किस तरीके से लोगों को कन्विंस करते हैं कि ऐसी सब जो एक्शंस हैं रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग कैसे सस्टेन। बॉम्बे जो एक तरीका यूज करता है वो ये करता है कि बॉम्बे में दे हैव अ प्यूनिटिव मेजर, मतलब पेनल्टी है कि अगर आप संभालेंगे नहीं तो, अगर आप मेंटेन नहीं करेंगे तो आपको पेनल्टी देना है पर स्क्वायर मीटर, सम देयर इज अ पेनल्टी व्हिच दे चार्ज, बट कोई इंसेंटिव अभी तक नहीं देते हम लोग। ग्रीन बिल्डिंग्स के लिए देयर इज एन इंसेंटिव बट नॉट फॉर स्पेसिफिक एक्शंस। पहला आपका ये क्वेश्चन था। दूसरा क्वेश्चन मैं भूल गया हूँ, आपका दूसरा क्वेश्चन क्या था?
Yes, मैं दूसरा क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहता था कि जो क्लाइमेट चेंज का मेजर इम्पैक्ट है शहरों में वो किस पे हो रहा है, क्योंकि एज एन इलेक्टेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव, एज एन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, आप किसके लिए प्लान बना?
यस यस, देखिए मैंने एक डेफिनेशन आपको दिखाया था वल्नरेबिलिटी का। वल्नरेबिलिटी का बेसिकली मीनिंग ये होता है कि कितना हमको क्लाइमेट चेंज इम्पैक्ट करेगा। वो डेफिनेशन में एक और चीज होता है जो है एडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी। जैसे देखिए फ्लड आता है, अब आप में जो हम लोग अच्छे मतलब ये इसमें फ्लैट्स में रहते हैं या बंगलोज में रहते हैं, उनपे फ्लड इतना इम्पैक्ट नहीं करता, बट आप जैसे देखें कि जैसे सिटीज डेवलप होती है कुछ हद तक स्लम्स डेवलप होते हैं इन ड्रेन्स पे जो कि फ्लड होती है। और देखिए हमारे पास एक मैकेनिज्म है कि अगर मेरा गाड़ी भी डूब गया या मेरा बाइक भी डूब जाता है तो मेरे पास एक इंश्योरेंस का सहारा है जिससे मैं उसका पैसा भी रिकवर कर लूंगा। बट एक दिहाड़ी मजदूर जो स्लम में रह रहा है, जिसको हमने एज अ सिटी के लिए में आने के लिए फोर्स किया बिकॉज उसका एम्प्लॉयमेंट नहीं था और अभी वो सिटी में आया है, उसका अगर ये घर डूबता है उसके पास पैसा नहीं है क्योंकि फॉर्मल बैंकिंग सिस्टम को का एक्सेस ही नहीं है। इसीलिए वो लोग ज्यादा वल्नरेबल है जिनका एडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी नहीं है। सो दिस कैन बी पीपल लिविंग इन स्लम्स, दिस कैन बी एल्डरली। सो हमने कोविड में देखा हाउ एल्डरली आर मोर अफेक्टेड देन द यंग। सो कुछ कुछ आपके फिजिकल एट्रीब्यूट्स पे डिपेंड करता है, कुछ कुछ आपके बाय द वर्च्यू ऑफ वेयर यू स्टे, मतलब आप कितना रिस्क जोन में है, और कुछ कुछ आपका पर्सनल एडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी पे डिपेंड करता है। बहुत सी सिटीज कोशिश कर रही है कि ये जो डिवाइड है बिटवीन द अर्बन पुअर एंड अर्बन दिस थिंग द अर्बन रिच, हाउ डू यू रिड्यूस दैट। सो आप देखेंगे पिछले 10 साल में काफी काम हुआ है ऑन प्रोवाइडिंग हाउसिंग फॉर ऑल, अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग स्कीम्स एंड the basic services for urban poor. So this basically ये क्या करता है कि उनका adaptive capacity increase करता है कि even in flood after 2 days they will have access to clean water, जो कि जरूरी है। फ्लड में आप पानी का ही सबसे बड़ा समस्या आता है जब फ्लड आता है, एक्सेस टू क्लीन ड्रिंकिंग वाटर एंड सैनिटेशन। सो वो समस्या है। ये सब बेसिक सर्विसेज फॉर अर्बन पुअर या ये अर्बन हाउसिंग स्कीम्स, आवास योजना, ये प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना, ये लोग उनका एडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी बढ़ाते हैं। I hope Aviral that answers your question.
Yes, that sounds well. Lavish, एक चीज adding to the point, एक और क्वेश्चन बार हमसे पूछा जा रहा है कि कैसे हम रूरल और अर्बन डिवाइड को मैच करें। The water consumption are different, हम अर्बन में पॉपुलेशन ज्यादा है, हम कंजम्पशन ज्यादा कर रहे हैं, प्लस आपने जैसे स्टार्टिंग में ही कहा कि हम जैसे जैसे अर्बनाइजेशन की वजह वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स कॉन्क्रीटाइजिंग, तो हम जैसे कॉन्क्रीट से बढ़ रहे हैं तो हम क्या ऐसे डिवाइड जो रूरल एंड अर्बन डिवाइड है उसको कैसे कम कर सकते हैं? लवलेश, आई नो दिस इज वेरी टफ कॉल, बट या प्लीज यू कैन ऐड बेस्ड ऑन द पॉइंट्स प्लीज।
Yeah, I think first two questions are already answered by Tushar properly. ये जो तीसरा क्वेश्चन है, ये क्वेश्चन बड़े समय से है कि शहरीकरण होता जा रहा है, लोग शहरों की तरफ गांव से शिफ्ट होते जा रहे हैं और कॉन्क्रीटाइजेशन होके कंजम्पशन भी बढ़ गया, सारी चीजें ही बढ़ गई। इसका एक बहुत अच्छा एक सॉल्यूशन डॉक्टर एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम ने इंडिकेट किया था। इफ यू रिमेम्बर, ही कॉल्ड इट इन फॉर PURA, पूरा प्रोविजन ऑफ अर्बन अमेनिटीज इन रूरल एरियाज। तो ये एक प्रयास था कि एक अंधी जो दौड़ चली आ रही है कि रूरल से अर्बन में शिफ्ट होना ही क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ की इंप्रूवमेंट की गारंटी है, को अटेम्प्ट किया गया कि क्या हम शहरी सुविधाओं को भी कुछ हद तक गांव तक पहुंचाएं, एजुकेशन हो, हेल्थ हो या और प्रोस्पेक्ट्स हो, जैसे कि जो शिफ्ट है, जो अनकंट्रोल शिफ्ट है, उसको किसी हद तक कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं। नंबर 1। नंबर 2, रूरल अर्बन में दोनों ही बराबरी के जिम्मेदार हैं, क्योंकि जब अर्बन में गए तो हमारा कंजम्पशन पर कैपिटा बढ़ गया, क्योंकि अब मैं बाल्टी की जगह शावर से नहा रहा हूँ, या मेरी कार की वॉशिंग ज्यादा हो रही है, तो पर कैपिटा वाटर इंक्रीज जरूर हो गया। उसी समय पर वाटर का कंजम्पशन और कॉन्जर्वेशन बहुत कम हो गया। तो इस मुद्दे पर अर्बन एरियाज के अंदर बहुत सारे रिफॉर्म्स लाए गए हैं, बहुत सारे इंसेंटिव्स क्रिएट किए गए, जैसे तुषार बता रहे थे कि कॉलोनी स्तर पर या वार्ड स्तर पर कैसे हम इसको कम कर सकते हैं। तो आई थिंक ये एक उत्तरदायी बनता है सभी यूथ का अपने अपने मोहल्ले में, अपने अपने सोसाइटी में, क्योंकि हम अर्बन की तरफ अगर शिफ्ट हो गए हैं या अभी नहीं हुए हैं, तो कैसे हम इस शिफ्ट को रोक सकते हैं, या फिर कैसे इस रिसोर्स को और वाइजली यूज कर सकते हैं। Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Lavlesh. Thanks, Tushar. I know we are running short of time, so I'll just take final comments from both of you. आज के इस प्लेटफॉर्म की डिस्कशन जहां पे आज हमने किया अबाउट द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक वाटर, जैसे आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट जब वो अपने अपनी सिटीज के लिए पॉलिसी फ्रेम कर रहे हैं, या फिर अपने एज अ मेयर अपनी सिटी को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, क्या बातों का उनको ध्यान रखना चाहिए? विद दैट लास्ट वन कमेंट आई विल जस्ट रिक्वेस्ट तुषार एंड देन लवलेश टू एंड देन विल एंड दिस सेशन। प्लीज तुषार, ओवर टू यू।
यार मेरा सजेशन रहेगा, छोटे छोटे प्रोजेक्ट्स देखिए, छोटी अपॉर्चुनिटीज देखिए जहां आप कंट्रीब्यूट कर पाए, जो कि इम्प्लीमेंटेबल हो। मतलब आप बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट देखेंगे, फाइनेंशियल नहीं सेट हो रहा है, ये नहीं हो, छोटे प्रोजेक्ट्स देखिए, हाउ कैन यूथ कंट्रीब्यूट थ्रू स्मॉल इम्प्लीमेंटेबल प्रोजेक्ट्स, थ्रू आल्सो लोकलाइजिंग सॉल्यूशंस। ऐसा मत करिए कोई भी सॉल्यूशन जो बाहर दिख रहा है, गूगल में आया पहला सॉल्यूशन वो हम लोग सजेस्ट कर रहे हैं। आप देखिए कैसे इन सॉल्यूशंस को लोकलाइज करें, स्मॉल स्केल पे करें, मतलब स्मॉल छोटे छोटे भी हो, बट ज्यादा इनिशिएटिव्स लेने की कोशिश करें और लोकल नॉलेज का यूज करें। थैंक यू।
थैंक्स तुषार। लवलेश, व्हाट्स योर कमेंट? आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे पार्टिसिपेंट्स को?
Yeah, I would like to encourage all the youth out here, because it's high time, because हम population में भी the youth की अगर हम बात करें तो बहुत ज्यादा हैं, और यही हमारे वो hands हैं जो कल को जाके
I think we are facing some trouble with the network, right?
प्रयास कर सकते हैं। इस तरह Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lavlesh. With that, I know there are a lot of questions. हमारे experts आपके लिए available रहेंगे throughout the Prajatantra. आप ये सारे चीज share कर सकते हैं जो भी questions हो आपके. And I request Pushkal Shivam, who is the urban planner from UN Habitat India. I request him for a closing remark and a vote of thanks. Pushkal, over to you. Pushkal, we are not able to hear. Can you just...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect now.
Foundation, UN.
Pushkal, not. I think there is some problem with your voice. Can you unmute yourself again, please? Yes.
Is it audible now?
Audible now.
तो मैं ये बोल रहा था कि हमारे प्रजा फाउंडेशन
Pushkal, we again lost your voice, please.
It should be audible now.
Yes, better now.
तो उम्मीद करता हूँ जितने भी युवा प्रतिनिधि हैं यहाँ पे सुन रहा होगा। जो हमारा अगला नॉलेज सेशन है वो 30 तारीख को म्युनिसिपल फाइनेंस पे होगा। जो परिस्थिति है और वो उसके ऊपर होगा।
Thank you, Pushkal. Thank you on behalf of, I know we have some disturbance, but on behalf of Praja Foundation, on behalf of UN Habitat and National Institute of Urban Affairs, we thank all the participants for joining this session, and also Professor Tushar for joining us and giving your time, and Lavlesh, you too. To be a part of this knowledge session. I hope आज के knowledge session से the participant will get more understanding about their city and also उनके challenges उनको address करने हैं अपने policy preparation, also the mayor speech and the other competitions as well. With that, I'll just conclude the session, and we are eagerly waiting for the Chandrayaan to land on moon. So we all look forward for the live feed from ISRO. So with that, I'll just close this session. And thank you so much, all the participants and the speakers, and Pushkal from UN Habitat as well. Thank you so much. And we will close the session.